Just one other administrative item. You will shortly receive another outreach memo to schedule the first official, the second meeting of the MCI committee, because that will be in process soon. So.
Okay. So I think next we were going to go over roles and responsibilities for committee and town staff. And do you want to cover that?
One more. Okay. So, sort of two, I guess there's sort of three. We have the Stantec team that's here. And they're primarily responsible for the development of the master plan itself. As we already discussed, Alyssa is our staff lead on the whole project, doing most of the integration with the consultants. And then there is the MCI committee ourselves. We really will serve as a committee as the stakeholder engagement focus, but we're also sort of a sounding board. So as the consultants come up with some preliminary plans, our job is to make sure that we are truly representing the interests of our citizens and making sure that those are represented properly in the plan. So that's our main focus there as well. Some more discussions about that. And obviously, Sven's here representing some of the interests of the land use working group. I'll be here obviously representing the select board, and all of you have a relevant background and will play a role in outreaching to our stakeholders. So
yeah, and just in terms of the lines of communication, the steering committee is really going to be helpful for public outreach and letting the community know with your different touch points in the community, boards and committees, what, reporting on progress of the master plan. And then community development and myself will be working with the consultant team, kind of being the lines of communication between the town and the consultant team, Stantec, and their partners, and then also communication with the committee, the MCI Master Plan Committee will be a combination of the town manager's office, and I think Shannon is going to play a big role in the communication, setting up meetings, agendas, communications with the steering committee, and we will also be playing a role as well when Shannon isn't here. So those are kind of the main roles of our group. So just wanted to go over that.
Question.
Yeah.
So we had a pretty robust stakeholder group that John and this group did a good job of communicating. Has that changed dramatically, or is it going to expand, or?
I think we're going to talk about it on our agenda later today, but we definitely
expanding it much more because we had so many organizations on that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Later on the agenda, there'll be a discussion around key stakeholders that we need to start engaging. So that reference document is part of that discussion, but there's others, as John said.
Great.
And so next we wanted to cover the progress since the vision plan completion. And I think, Mark, you were going to speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll talk a bit about that. Obviously, one of the main things is what we're doing right now, which is that we have procured consulting services and engineering support for the master plan creation. The goal of this group, of course, is to come up with a zoning package, and that's what we've hired for. In the previous engagement that the advisory board was involved in, that was about figuring out what could possibly be done. This is about making a decision about what should be done. As we mentioned a few minutes ago, the ongoing collaboration with DCAM has yielded considerably more information about the status of the wastewater treatment facility, what that capacity is. There's some ongoing engineering work being done there. There's a lot more clarity about what we may want to do in order to not only establish a change of ownership and control of that, but it's also future capacity in that. And that's going to figure into your land use discussions, we expect. And some of that we had some glimmers of last year. There's more clarity, I think, about that at this stage of the game. So the memorandum of agreement is currently under discussion. That's just basically outlining the process that is going to lead to an agreement of what may end up in an RFP for development. That's a secondary outcome from this particular process and sort of runs in parallel to the zoning. So it's not a very mysterious document. It's the points that we've been talking about out loud. So the select board is really, and of course, what we also have is some funding. The other thing that I would point out is the land use working group recommendations are out there now. When we were previously looking at the MCI site and the visioning, we didn't really understand what the possible help or requirements could be coming from the town municipality. That is much more clear, and that phase one report is there. So all of that work is allowing us to focus much more clearly on what's going on. And the last major element that I also mentioned before is the Mass DOT discussions, the preliminary design concepts for Mass DOT's Rotary project have become more clear. There is a letter that was recently sent by the select board to Mass DOT outlining some of our priorities for that. They include access to the MCI site, in particular to the north east corner of that site onto and off of Route 2. Inclusion of Baker Avenue traffic considerations, as well as making sure that we don't create extraordinary pressure on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail intersection crossing Commonwealth Avenue. So looking at those local circulation issues have been documented with Mass DOT. Mass DOT is interested in collaborating with this project, and they have already demonstrated a willingness to entertain multiple different access solutions as they advance the rotary redesign. So we'll want to build on that. So those are the key elements that have been advanced since the last round and are ready to be input into this process. Questions?
For the development RFP at the end of this process, who will be running that RFP process? Is that DCAM's RFP or the towns or something else?
It's expected that would be a DCAM RFP.
And so the decision of which developer to select in the proposal would be DCAM's exclusively.
Yes, however, the requirements that developer needs to meet are going to be reflective of the zoning and the priorities that we're setting as a town in this process. So it's an RFP that goes out that says, if you develop to this, you're highly likely to be permitted by the town of Concord because it's consistent with what the town of Concord wants to see done.
Right, but then as a result, zoning is the key deliverable, the town's key deliverable
Yes.
here. The second question is that there certainly in the housing community, there is a lot of impatience about the development of the Junction Village site and the provision of access to that site in order to enable earlier phasing of housing development, since it's been 10 years almost since there was, initially a project proposed there. So I don't know if that's a feasible outcome of this process, but I wanted to check in on, is that outside of scope? Because simply we're just doing zoning, so there's not going to be any provision for a road or anything that's going to be able to be made.
MOA that's being developed, there is acknowledgement of the Junction Village site, and how that will be integrated in the larger plan.
Okay, but
So
in other words, though, it's still, we need to complete this process before anything.
process, because we've already, the CHDC, ideally, we want to integrate that affordable housing that's deeded there onto this site.
Absolutely, from conceptually, but I just wanted to check because certainly the housing
Right.
community is asking whether that can be sort of peeled off and proceeded, in an accelerated fashion.
Yeah, phasing
Okay.
is part of.
Thank
If I can add to that, I think that one of the things that became clear was that there's a deed restriction on that parcel.
Yes.
And yet, if we're looking to design the entire site, you don't necessarily want to have all the housing right there.
Right.
So the idea, and my understanding was that DCAM had the power to actually help
Yes.
and
Yeah,
Right.
that's it. Go.
I
That's my
understand.
understanding as well, and one of the reasons why, I mean, DCAM could have proceeded with trying to master plan the site themselves. But one of the reasons why we jointly agreed that it was better for the town of Concord to actually run this process was because as the owner of the Junction Village property, we could make that in scope ourselves, and it is in fact in scope.
Right, so there would be a separate RFP process, obviously, run
Yeah.
by CHDC for the Junction Village portion.
Yeah, that's likely. Okay. Any further on the introductions? Did I cover the basis?
You got it.
I think you covered everything.
Great.
Thank you
I
so
have a
much.
question. Could the consultant team maybe introduce themselves?
Yeah, that's next.
That's coming up.
That's next. I don't know if, do we need to introduce everyone else though? It's a.
It's probably worth going around.
Yeah, why don't we just go
Yeah.
around and on?
Yeah.
Remember when we went over the agenda a couple of days ago, I wasn't sure when introductions was
Right.
gonna happen.
Let's skip through them.
Let's, we should definitely do that at some point.
Okay. Should we do it
Let's
now?
do it now,
Let's just do
right,
it now
so
and then we'll have the
yeah.
consultant
Okay.
team. Okay.
So I've already been speaking on Mark Allen, select board chair, and I'm gonna suggest that Wendy go next.
Oh, okay. All right, so Wendy Ravelli, member of the select board, I've been on the select board for 2 years. And my background, I'm retired. My background is really in healthcare finance in that area. I've been on several committees in town, on the finance committee, the light board and solar task force, so have good understanding of town committees and a good understanding of town priorities.
Great.
Dan?
So Dan Gainsborough, let's see, I also, like Wendy, have been involved in several different committees over the years, most recently on the MCI Advisory Board. Locally, I develop residential, energy efficient, connected communities.
I'm Burton Flint. My day job is I'm a general counsel of a software company. But my experience that's germane to this is I was on the West Concord Advisory Committee, chaired the planning committee, the planning board, sorry, and I'm just coming off the Community Preservation Committee.
Sven, you want to-
Oh, yeah, Sven Weaver, currently, co-chair, of the Land Use Working Group, also member of Public Works Commission. Day job is, investing, venture capital investing. And I love, numbers and simulations. I actually have 3 AI models on the town of Concord and zoning and impact on schools, but I would love to see how the professionals are doing that.
I'm Erin Cusker. I was previously a member of the MCI Advisory Board. Most of the time, I'm a licensed architect. I do a lot of planning. I work here in town at Studio GSK.
I'm John Boynton. I served on the MCI Advisory Board with Dan and Aaron. Happy to be back. I am basically an investor and entrepreneur, mostly in the technology space. My wife and I own the Bradford Mill. I've been on the town's Economic Vitality Committee twice, and have done a variety of things around town and was tasked last time around with leading the stakeholder outreach.
And Paul, do you want to?
Oh, sure. Paul Lillehagen, Senior Project Manager on the real estate team at DCAM. Been involved with this project for a couple of years now, and I know most of the faces in the room here, several of them very well, and have had we at DCAM, I bring apologies that neither our commissioner nor deputy commissioner of real estate can come today. School vacations and the attendant travel that happens to take them out of state, but really, we have had a great partnership with the town of Concord, with the staff, with the select board, with the members of the MCI Concord Advisory Board so far, and anticipates that will continue with this group.
And just a quick introduction of town staff, I think, Carrie.
Sure, I'm Carrie LaFleur, I'm the town manager. I've been with the town for about 10 years and excited to be able to sit in and watch this process unfold.
I'm Alan Cathcart, currently Director of Concord Public Works, otherwise a potential lame duck, but, staying involved and participating. As Mark mentioned, have been sort of a point person on the wastewater issues, that relate to the town generally, but specifically on MCI as well as working with our engineering team, coordinating with, MassDOT on the Route 2, issues and, rotary, reconfiguration. So they plugged in on that front.
Yeah, Russ Carlstead, Facility Manager.
Megan Smudo, Deputy Town Manager.
Christine Zale, Senior Planner.
Elisa Sandoval, Community Development Director.
And then I'm a stray member of the committee.
You need no introduction.
Apparently not. Anyway, Matt Johnson, I have been on the zoning board of appeals. I've just recently retired as someone in the enterprise software product management space. And I've been on the zoning board of appeals, the planning board, where I was chair before Burton, and on the select board, as well as most recently on the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. As you've heard, I'm focused on housing issues at the moment. And I also belong to the Concord Housing Foundation, which is a private charitable organization in town, not a town committee.
Ann Clifford, Senior Planner.
Elizabeth Hughes, Town Planner, and then we also have another select board member here.
Interested observer.
All right, I
Can I
think.
ask a question? I've noted a lot about technology experience here. If Sven has the AI models, do you want to just short circuit the whole process?
I still don't trust AI enough.
Okay.
Good.
Jury's still out.
They're just on school impacts, so not the whole thing. Oh, okay.
Very powerful. I have 3 more.
He's got the master plan. Done.
So I think with this, we'll turn it over to the Santec Consulting Team, Inspect MC, to do their presentation. And Elizabeth, can you let them share?
Yeah, I already have.
Oh, okay, great.
You want to do introductions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Sure. Well, it is really wonderful to meet everybody. I'm Maggie Connor. I'm a principal and senior urban designer with Stantec. My background is in architecture and urban design, but I've sort of throughout my career been pretty passionate about contextual urbanism and really helping communities figure out how to develop in a way that feels like their community and not a Stantec design or a Jeff design or like something that's worked really collaboratively. So we're excited to be here. We're excited to start with this group. I can't wait to see the site. But we're here with our SPECT MC partners, and maybe since Phil, I think, will be starting the presentation, we can have Jeff and his team introduce themselves.
So hi, I'm Jeff Speck, partner in SPECT MC with Chris Dempsey. Johnnevi Kirthane is, say hi, Johnnevi. She's the project manager on our side. So not all of you were in our sales pitch to win this job. But we're so excited to be working here. We work all over the country, but we're based in Brookline. I grew up in Belmont. I know this area very well, although I've never peeled off the rotary in the 100 of times I've gone through the rotary. I've always just tried to make it through. But we've partnered with Stantec on more than a dozen, maybe 24 projects like this over the last 25 years. And we're currently working with DCAM in Lancaster, as Chris will talk a little bit more about, on a very similar challenge. So we do feel like we're a really good fit for this job, and we really want to see it turn out well. I'll hand it to Chris, I think.
Well, you'll hear from me later, but I'm Chris Dempsey, co-founder of SPECT MC, and I'll turn it to Phil.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Phil Chafing. I'm the project manager for the Stantec team overall. I'm a senior associate at Stantec and an urban designer and planner. So I've been leading projects like this and participating in projects like this for a number of years. I'm just very excited to be here in Concord and getting started today. So I'm gonna walk through a presentation that'll just talk a little bit more about our team and the expertise that we're bringing to this, and just to kind of give you a sense of how we'll be working together over the next several months. Then kind of go through the process, sort of what we'll be doing, the major public engagement touch points throughout the process, because that's obviously a really important part of that. And then I want to make sure there's plenty of time at the end. We have a few initial discussion questions. I'm sure other questions or ideas will come up as we talk. So please feel free as we go through the presentation here. If you have a question, jump in, let us know. And if not, we're definitely planning on hopefully at least 45 minutes to an hour of conversation at the end. So there'll be plenty of time at that point as well. So to jump right in, as we said, our team, Stantec is the lead, Spec Dempsey are close partners leading kind of the urban design, the master plan component of this. And then Community Scale is our third partner firm. They'll be co-leading the market analysis piece of this and then leading the zoning development in the second half of the project. And as Jeff mentioned, we've done dozens of projects very similar to this over the past decade plus, seen lots of those then go on to be built by private developers, and learn some of the lessons from that process as well. So I'm very excited to bring that experience here. As a team, we unite all of the different aspects of this, whether it's the engineering component of it, the transportation planning and design component, the landscape architecture and public realm piece of this. All of that is part of our team. Stantec as a firm has done a lot of work in Concord recently, and currently Liza Cohen and Ralph Danisco and their team, they're leading the transportation strategy, which is in the draft plan phase right now. They're also part of the team that's providing peer review on the town's behalf of the MassDOT Route 2 options, including the rotary. So that letter that Mark mentioned from the select board that went to MassDOT very recently, our team helped to draft some of the key points of that. So we're very familiar with those different options, providing some requests to MassDOT to do some additional analysis to kind of understand what the pros and cons of that are. But so we're very familiar with that key variable for the MCI site. And then just on a more practical basis, also just doing some asset management work for the town as well. Community Scale are the lead for that firm, Nels, speaking of school vacation week, was unable to join us today. But they'll be leading the zoning piece of this, primarily also contributing to the market piece. They have done a lot of zoning work in Massachusetts over the last 4 and 5 years, ranging from complete recodification of zoning codes for municipalities to doing more specific zoning overlays for a part of a community or design guidelines. And they also have a particular expertise in housing. Whether that is zoning for housing or understanding the market demand and the development, constraints on housing development. So they're very familiar with all of that as well. And so we're very excited that they'll be part of this process as well. And then Spec Dempsey, I'll let Chris talk a little bit about their relationship with DCAM, because I think that's a great example for the MCI site and something that we'll be learning a lot about as well.
Thank you. So, quick question on the zoning, but that's perhaps also for Alyssa. So on the work we did on MBTA zoning and on Article 34 and 36, I assume we used some consultant there. Was it a different consultant firm? Is it the same? Or how does the findings of that work then interconnect to that? Because we cannot just look zoning on one little corner of Concord. We have to look at the overall picture. So do we have an interconnection there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll turn it over to Elizabeth because I wasn't here when the MBTA zoning was completed. How was that?
So this consultant team did not work on the MBTA community zoning. And you said Article 30 coming out.
34 and 36. Just the findings around all of the zoning work, and how do that connect to what we're doing here, so that in the end we have a holistic picture of what happens overall in Concord?
Yeah, to be clear, Article 34 established a mixed use bylaw. So obviously, if we're thinking about mixed use in this space, and then Article 36 is about shared parking. And so again, parking requirements will be, integral to this. I think that's where you're going. You've mentioned MBTA overlay, but that's not Article 34.
No, but there's three major zoning changes.
So let me clarify. So Article 34 and we currently have a combined business residence bylaw, and we're amending that and changing the name to mixed use. That's not permitted on this site
at the moment.
But I don't think about, I think about just because when we look in the end, the overall impact for Concord of what we are doing on zoning around this property, we cannot let it interconnect with the zoning work that is done in the last several years and potential changes for the town all over. So changes driven by MBTA zoning, changes driven by Article 34 and 36. How is the overall impact when we now add this zoning to it? So we cannot let these things just work inside us. I just want to make sure.
These guys will become experts on the existing zoning.
That's right. I mean, the first step of Nels and his team's work is going to be reviewing your existing, thoroughly reviewing your existing zoning and taking all that on board to understand. Obviously.
In fact, they did, Nels did that already.
Yeah, of course.
For the interview.
Of course. So that's always the first step. And then as we talk about the options for, what comes out of this process in terms of decisions made about this site, understanding there may be a few different paths forward that make sense for how to properly zone and regulate this piece. And that would be something that we would, talk through as we have, more clarity on the direction for the process. But absolutely, because you don't want to change a piece that then has ramifications in other places where that zoning leads. So that's a pretty common concern and something we know to be careful for.
Right, so our deliverable is zoning for MCI, but as we talk about other properties, the concept of the housing zoning and the mixed use may become very relevant. So we can't lose sight of that. It may not be our responsibility, but there's implications for the rest of the time.
Yes, and then those two articles are,
Thursday.
if they're adopted, we'll definitely be sharing those.
There may be more that you want to tweak next year, so.
Also really helpful to understand how the experience you guys are having with any of those zoning changes that have taken place and where the rub has been, so that we don't recreate problems for you either. Yeah.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Chris Dempsey with Spec Dempsey. You heard a little bit from my partner, Jeff, earlier. And I want to just reiterate how excited we are to be working in such an exceptional community and a place with such rich history. That history is easy to remember when it's the middle of April and we just celebrated Patriots Day. But we are very aware that Concord's history is not just about the colonial era, but also about Thoreau and the cabin in the woods, and that it extends to this site as well that we're talking about and that we're planning. It became very clear in the visioning work, the pride that members of this community have about their engagement with the prison, that people actually went, past the walls and helped mentor and teach and tutor some of the inmates that were there, and that there was some dialogue and, again, connection between the community and the site. And we take that very seriously. We also really appreciate and respect the visioning work that's happened. We know that there are veterans from that committee on this committee, and that hundreds of Concord residents showed up and weighed in with their thoughts and their views about the history of the site and what the future of the site could look like. We're really proud to be working in a number of historic communities. The one that's furthest away from here is Lahaina in Maui, and maybe some of you have been there. That's the community that burned down in the fire in August of 2023. It was really the Nantucket of the Pacific. It had these 19th century buildings and small streets, and it was a really truly special place. And we've been hired by the county of Maui to bring back that unique nature of that neighborhood, especially as it becomes as it relates to the streets and the walkability of that place. My partner, Jeff, I'm going to brag about him for a little bit. You're going to hear a lot more from him on Tuesday, May 5th. And I really encourage everyone that's listening to this recording or following along to attend that event. But Jeff is the author of the book Walkable City, which is the best-selling urban planning book written this century. And he's considered by Planetizen magazine, which is one of the leading urban planning magazines, to be one of the 2 or 3 most influential urbanists or urban planners working in North America today. So I feel very lucky to be his partner, and he's going to bring that skill and that experience to this site. And again, you'll hear more about that on May 5th. We want to talk about one place in particular where we're working, which is a lot closer than Maui, and it's right down the road in Lancaster, Massachusetts, where we are working in partnership with DCAM. DCAM is our client, and working very closely with the town on the Lancaster Industrial School for Girls. In the history of the 1850s, girls reform school.
The sound has been lost.
Excuse me, the sound has failed for those of us on Zoom.
And there's no video.
The sound has been lost.
You might want to reboot the owl. We have no image from the meeting room and we have no sound.
Can you hear me? I just unmuted my microphone and we're not getting any feedback either, so.
Did you hit the plus here, Bert? I'm gonna turn it up.
Hear that? We hear you, but we can't see you.
Oh, he said he can hear, but.
We have a frozen image of the girls' school in Lancaster.
Yeah.
The frozen. Yeah, but.
Frozen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a screen share that's going on.
The OWL meeting room video is not being transmitted.
Here.
We're working on it, stand by. So that suggests that the speaker's working.
Glad we have the former CIO.
Yeah.
I know, he knows something.
Who's realizing that he's currently Pam, but that's okay. I've been called worse.
Just a step up for you, Mark.
It is. Yeah. See, there goes. Yeah, that's me.
It's early COVID Zoom.
That's better.
That's all triggered.
It's coming through your.
But it's echo. Means it's not a natural.
Now we just need to get the video turned on.
Being turned on.
I guess it always been turned on.
Okay,
So,
yeah, so now you need to turn off your speaker, Mark.
whoever's got sound, but it works. But we're
found
curious
it.
about the
Video.
video.
Still video.
No video.
So
Okay, well, that's.
click click where it says video
Nothing to do there.
click here, because it's,
Yeah, you're on.
you've selected it now, it's.
There we go.
Wow.
Because the video's coming from.
Oh,
TV.
hey.
Yeah.
And will they
Okay.
also get this, will they also get the screen share?
Yeah,
Sure.
we're back.
Don't touch anything, please.
Okay,
Chris, start over.
Yeah, no.
we're gonna start the whole meeting over.
Let's just confirm that they can hear us. Can someone speak up who's remote to say you hear us?
Sure,
all
we
good.
can hear you and we can see you.
All right, we're back in business.
So at a future meeting, we're gonna dig into more of the details on Lancaster, but I just want to show a few images that I think help show the character of what it is that we're trying to create here. So these are some renderings of what will be in place at the Lancaster Industrial School in the future, we hope. And you can see that the image here matches a plan down on the bottom of the screen.
Is that a similar situation where everything's gonna be kind of, the slate is wiped clean and everything that's built from the ground up is new?
So it's a great question. So I've got an image here that I want to go to.
The chapel.
Yeah, I'm gonna start with this. So this is what's here today. This is actually a historic barn that we are working to preserve, and it's one of about 8 or 10 buildings on the site that have been identified as contributing to the historic character of the site. This is, I think, a particularly beautiful example. And you can see in this image back here, sorry,
Other way.
I'm going the right way. It's just slow. So this is the same view here. So that's that same barn that you saw in that image in the back here, but now with townhomes and bungalows sort of surrounding it to create that feel. And we'd love to do the same thing, that if we can. The buildings are a different character, obviously, within the prison site than 19th century setting, but maybe there are some opportunities to preserve what's there.
Out of curiosity, how many units per acre is this now?
Yeah.
380 by 70.
Yeah, so we're targeting like 4 to 6 units per acre.
Okay.
Across the entire site. Obviously, that's not spread evenly, right? So there are big chunks of the site that are open.
Which is lower density than what we'll have.
So again, we'll do more of a deep dive on this process, and it is an ongoing process, but we just wanted to share, again, some of the kind of character and imagery that we create that we hope will be really well received by this committee and by your colleagues and neighbors in Concord.
Right. Stand up because I realize this row of people can't actually see me very well. Okay, so that's sort of an overview of our team, our experience, some of the perspectives that we're bringing to this as we're just getting started. Next, wanted to move and just talk a little bit about process, what it is we're going to be doing between now and the end of this year. And one way to think of it is kind of 3 overall phases. On the next few slides, we'll talk about the details of each of them. But initially, we're getting started just understanding all of the great work that has been done so that we can build from that. Ultimately, working towards a draft illustrative plan early this summer. That's our first interim deliverable. Then refining that into a more detailed framework plan that's going to include phasing, fiscal impact considerations, things like that. And then ultimately this fall, developing the draft zoning for the site. The goal of our team, our project timeline is that by November, the draft zoning is ready to go. In December, we'll kind of wrap things up into a final master plan and zoning package. And then that zoning will go to either a special town meeting or annual town meeting for consideration.
Bill, at what point would that preliminary package go to the planning board for its process?
That, Elisa, would that be this fall?
It would be in the fall, yeah.
So before November.
Well,
as soon as there's a draft, whatever that is, whether it's a working draft or a bullet points, the soonest something is available to go to the planning board. But again, I'm not, that is also hasn't been, determined is this gonna be, the steering committee putting something forth with input to the planning board that the select board's gonna put forth on the warrant, or, or is it gonna be a joint venture between the select board and the planning board to put something on the warrant, or, so that's still part of that conversation.
So if the output of the committee is zoning, the framework plan is really like an example of what might be built. A developer could still go back and just start over from scratch within the zoning and build something else.
So, here's why that's not likely to be the case, and we'll use Lancaster as the example. So I don't want to speak for Paul, and Paul, please jump in here, but presuming that Lancaster is the model, DCAM is putting requirements into the sale of the land that will require the developer essentially to build what is in the framework model. It's really kind of tying the hands of the developer in many ways to create an outcome that both DCAM is comfortable with and the town is comfortable with as well.
Well, yeah, it seems like another option would be to kind of carve up the parcel according to the master plan elements and, do RFPs for each of those segments. But okay, so that I'm just wanting to make sure that the framework plan we're developing isn't sort of like these vision documents, just a little more elaborated of like, hey, check this out.
The Lancaster project has not gotten to RFP yet, but we are expecting our regulating plan to be in the RFP and to be built into the deed essentially as that transfer is made from state to private developer, and that it will require or encumber the developer to essentially build what is in the regulation.
And the expectation is DCAM will contract with a single master developer.
Yeah, they may decide to then, under that carve out to other developer partners. But I think, again, I don't want to speak for Paul, but I think DCAM wants to run one RFP for one master developer so that they don't have to deal with multiple entities.
And I think I would add to that, given the amount of site work that is needed on a site that currently has a 20-foot concrete wall around most of it, that's going to be best handled by one developer who's taking that on.
Can you give examples of what those requirements are? So does it speak to how much housing, how much commerce? Just a little more detail.
So I want to, I'll key Chris up to talk about the verbiage behind the plan. But this is a really good moment to talk about the distinction between illustrative plan and a regulating plan. An illustrative plan, which is what you see here, is one of many optimal outcomes, not knowing the exact density, not knowing the exact mix of uses, not knowing essentially the different aspects of the private development that will occur on site, independent of the civic realm, independent of roads, independent of streets and squares, plazas, trees saved, and other public things. We understand that there's a lot of variety. There's a lot of good outcomes that are different from each other. So we do an illustration plan that shows, oh, this is maybe our favorite among all those outcomes. This is the one that we like the most. But then it's really important to step forward into what we call a regulating plan. And I'm sorry, it's a little small for the people in the back, but this regulating plan allows this illustration plan to happen. But you can see that it's controlling a lot less. It's basically delineating the trees that are saved, both individual trees and hedgerows. It's identifying the location of each street, and then each street is designed in terms of what you see from the edge of right-of-way to edge of right-of-way, sidewalk, trees, cart path, parking, etc. And then you see what are called frontage lines, which is actually the edges that the buildings need to lean up against in order to properly shape the public realm. So we know that those aspects of private buildings that influence the quality of the public realm are controlled, while we don't control the things that don't matter, like the exact density below a cap, or the whether it's a single family house or a bungalow or a row house or other things that the plan this plan is mute on. So a diagram like this is what would be included in the purchase and sale agreement with the developer, along with verbiage that covers a lot of different things, which I'll let Chris talk about.
Yeah. That's a big topic, but let me try to shine some light on it by talking about a particular example of where we're working with the town and with DCAM to try to get to the right outcome, and where we're still facing a choice. So, one of the principles of walkable places is that they have relatively narrow streets. A lot of 20th century building in the US is wide suburban streets that are not particularly nice to cross or even walk along. They encourage high speed of vehicles instead of, calm vehicles that are still moving but not going 40 miles per hour through a neighborhood. And so we prefer streets that are really at most 20 feet wide. That's typically kind of how we negotiate with the fire department around width. We'd love to go even narrower if we could. But the town of Lancaster, because it hasn't done much development at all, and the development it has done has been mostly suburban style development, they have requirements for wider streets. And so the streets that we're proposing in the Lancaster Industrial School are not consistent with the subdivision regulations and the language that's required for the community to adopt these as public ways. So, but we know that they are essential to the quality of the neighborhood that we're creating. And so the town has two options here. They can either adopt new subdivision regulations that would allow for those more narrow streets and then adopt those roads as public roads. That's one option. Or they might say, you know what, this is easier and simpler to actually keep the entire parcel as basically one big condominium, and these roads stay private, but they can be built to what we would say a higher standard, a better standard than what's on the books in Lancaster today. And that's the kind of thing that this committee and that ultimately your planning board and your town meeting will have to grapple with. If we want a walkable place, if we want it to be a particular character that really feels like it could have been a neighborhood that's been in Concord for 100 years or more, we may either have to make some changes to zoning and to our subdivision standards, or we may have to get creative and say, this is actually going to stay as a condominium with private roads to be able to have that quality that we think is important.
So is it fair to say then you come up with your, did you say prescriptive plan or the regulatory? Regulating plan. And that's where the focus should be in terms of that goes into the purchase and sale agreement. And the zoning we're doing is to enable, not the zoning isn't per se to drive an outcome. It's to enable where we start with the plan.
Yes, and I think community scale with Stantec will figure out the best way to mate our zoning with your zoning.
Right.
But it's different in every community.
And things like design, does that then go through, design guidelines that go into our zoning, or where does the design come in as opposed to just where the buildings meet the streets?
So there's a lot of there's a limited amount, for example, of architectural controls within the regulating plan.
Okay.
Right, a limited amount, because we don't want to be unduly descriptive in terms or restrictive in terms of style or other things. But we do have a number of rules against certain kinds of eyesores that you might have, like radar dishes or bubble skylights or other things like that. But mostly we try not to be too prescriptive of architecture in these documents. Now, there's a pretty heady debate these days about architectural review committees and their role both in improving design and in stopping production of housing. And we'll let that be a town debate, but we won't be discussing that as part of this plan.
But maybe just to carry on to that, one of the things that the regulating plan and I think what gets probably discussed with DCAM and reinforced in the RFP are things like how parking is handled and things like that will have for sure knock-on effects on what the architecture appears from the street. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for example, you can see that while we have a healthy amount of on-street parking, which we think is important, especially if there's a mixed-use area, that the longer-term parking is almost always hidden in our plans. We don't like seas of asphalt supporting parking that interrupt or draw away from the public realm. And so Jeff hasn't drawn it yet, but I can assure you that our plan will have alleyways in the backs of homes or townhomes where the parking can be, so that it doesn't need to be in a driveway that again disrupts the walkability or the visual character of a neighborhood.
Right. So I think those are all very good questions and just an example of some of the discussions that we'll be having as we move through the process here. And particularly at a couple of upcoming public events that we'll get to in just a few minutes. So just to talk through the process a little bit more step by step, this initial phase, what we've been doing in April and into May is again, just getting to really understand the vision plan and all of the backup analysis and documentation that went into that work last year, as well as understanding the wastewater treatment plant, the latest on the Mass DOT options for Route 2, other relative town planning documents, just to really understand the context that we're working in here. As well as conducting some precedent research to inform this process. So the Lancaster School is one example. Stantec was involved in the Northland Needham project, mixed use redevelopment of a site that included both historic mill buildings, but also some sort of standard suburban strip malls. So we'll be looking at that as an example, as well as a couple of other regional precedent examples. And then also looking to understand how correctional facilities throughout the country have been successfully redeveloped and what that relationship has been like between the host municipality, the property owner, the private developer who ultimately makes that happen. We'll also be starting some market analysis very shortly to understand housing in general, but also commercial and other markets. And then, as was mentioned, we'll talk more about in just a moment, hosting a public kickoff event on Tuesday, May 5th at the Concord Free Public Library. So I'm going to come back and talk about that in our next public event in just a couple slides here. Moving forward then, the next big public event is going to be in early June, and that's a design charrette week. Think of it as a design workshop. Very collaborative, interactive process, and that's also coming up in a couple slides. But that's going to be where we do a lot of the work with staff, with stakeholders, with the community to develop the draft illustrative plan. During the same time period, we're going to be reviewing the work that's going on right now, looking at the development capacity of several other municipal sites and what that means for the MCI site. And then beginning the fiscal impact analysis. Once we have a draft illustrative plan, beginning to really understand the fiscal impacts of that. Then as we move into the fall, using the feedback that we're getting from the fiscal impact analysis, from the analysis of the other municipal sites, the continued public feedback, the committee inputs, ultimately working towards a draft framework plan, that draft regulatory plan that Jeff and Chris were just talking about. The zoning work will start late summer, early fall as well. So then how do we translate the regulating plan and the illustrative plan into zoning language? And there'll be two more presentations, public events in the fall. One to present the draft framework plan, which hopefully at that point everybody has seen, is familiar with, and there's a lot of support for. That's the role of public engagement, especially in the first half of the process, is to build support for that final end goal. And then the draft zoning will also be presented informally before it's put before the planning board in a public hearing setting, just informally to get feedback on the zoning. And then ultimately by the end of the year, as I said, an MCI Concord master plan document that pulls all of the deliverables from our planning process together into one cohesive document that's sort of the planning package for the site here. And then the revised draft zoning that's ready for town meeting consideration. So that's our end goal. Our work is slated to be complete by the end of the year here. Obviously, then the work of redeveloping the MCI site continues on after us with the zoning, with the disposition that DCAM will lead, and the further steps from there.
So we are done by December?
With the zoning.
Yes,
But isn't the master plan the end deliverable and then we are done? That's how the charter reads.
No, the charge reads that once the zoning gets passed, we're done.
Yeah, so then February.
Perhaps.
I mean, that's been decided, it's gonna be a special, it's a desire to have a special town meeting as opposed to waiting until.
Until annual town meeting, because April, all of it's longer.
Right.
Maybe more.
So then throughout this process, over the next several months, we'll be meeting with this committee regularly, both in person and virtually, to talk about upcoming community engagement events, get your input on draft deliverables as we're working on those. Stakeholder engagement will be an important part of this, including specific outreach to the neighbors and other West Concord organizations who have maybe a particular interest because they are right there next to the site. And we'll also be meeting regularly with ECAM, Mass DOT, with Public Works to understand those key variables as well. So that ongoing engagement and sort of iterative feedback loops are part of our process too. And I think really important to make sure that as much as we can, working, MassDOT has their own schedule for the Route 2 project, but as best we can, understand where they are in the process to make sure that the work we're doing reflects that and is able to accommodate and influence, perhaps the direction that's heading.
Phil, a question about wastewater treatment, and maybe our lame duck advising as well. With the first round of planning, there was a thought that the wastewater treatment plant, maybe on its own timeline, it might even have been conveyed to the town prior to the resolution of all the other design questions. Is that still the case? Well, is that a separate negotiation, or is that now bound up in this process?
It's not bound up in this process. It acknowledges this process. I think early on, there's legitimate questions on practicality of the transfer of responsibilities, management of that. So we're working with DCAM on a schedule that works for both of us. But there's it's going to be its schedule. If people need to understand that facility has to continue to operate, right? So that is currently an existing functional wastewater treatment facility. So part of the challenge is to keep it and maintain it is sort of a key interest of DCAM. The town's trying to partner in a way that, we're in the business. Can we facilitate? Can we help? Is there a transitional plan that might work? Those are part of the discussions. But I think I will tell this committee, DCAM is eager to deal with things in a very timely manner. I've been in Concord 30 years. Concord really likes to debate, discuss, turn over. The treatment plant, there's no choice. We got to keep it running, functional, and it's in need of some improvements sooner rather than later. So that's a time schedule that is not planning, that's engineering. But I think we have to be careful that we're working with DCAM on tight schedules, and they're the ones saying, we want to do this quickly. They're also the one to say, yes, we understand we need to take more time. And so that's the partnership I think we have on the wastewater side, so.
And, I will say, Alan has consultants, we at DCAM have consultants, both separate from this process, looking at that wastewater treatment plant. We are working on getting clearer numbers about the actual capacity needed by the remaining state facilities that are tied to that. We're looking at, what the order of investment in that looks like. That's a separate process, separate from this. And the negotiation of that potential transfer is separate from this process as well. That's, directly with the select board. But it's very much part and parcel with our goal to see the campus redeveloped writ large.
All right. So I think this is just the overall project schedule here. I realize it's almost impossible to read at this scale. But the main point I think here at the bottom are the major public touch points. So the May 5th public kickoff with Jeff Speck's talk about the principles of great neighborhoods. The design week, the week of June 8th through the 11th. We're going to talk about both of those in just a moment. And then in the fall, the draft framework plan and the draft zoning presentation and discussion for additional feedback at that point. So with that, upcoming public engagement.
Quick question. So it may have been covered by one of your earlier bullets, but I didn't see a lot of mention about site analysis and evaluation. And it just occurs to me, if you're going to generate an illustrative plan, it may be helpful for the committee and others in the community to see how you guys think about the site in terms of what its strengths and weaknesses are, and challenges and opportunities, all that stuff.
Agree. There's been a lot of great work done already in the plan that just completed, so we'll start there. But yeah.
I assume that when we talked about touch points with this committee, that's part of the discussion.
Yeah,
Those
yeah,
updates,
that's
right?
part of our kind of work right now is understanding all of the analysis that's already been done. And then looking at it through our own eyes, seeing if there's any additional layers or input we want to bring in to that. The site tour this afternoon is certainly going to be part of that process. But yes, that's one of our kind of initial foundational steps, is to really understand the site, the context around it, how it fits in. And that'll be a combination of work that's already been done and then.
One of the questions that came up in the prior work was, maybe part of the economic analysis was the understanding that preparing the site for its future use was going to be very expensive, right? And there's some unanswered questions about exactly what might exist below the surface, right? I wonder if there's any additional environmental work that's going to be done to begin to identify, for example, significant costs related to remediating asbestos that could be underground in the steam tunnels, that sort of thing.
That is not something that would specifically be within our scope. I think that's more with DCAM as the property owner. I know there have been the phase one environmental analysis, hazardous materials analysis. So I think it's partly kind of a question of where that goes in sort of the disposition process.
But it's also core to the financial viability of the site. So I think we're gonna have to grapple with that issue.
I would, it is core to, or it is a component at least of the financial considerations here. The important piece is like how that kind of work gets funded, and remediation. Once you dig it up, then you have to deal with it, which is best tied to an actual capital project, which is, the type of thing that becomes a rounding error in the developer's effort to build out the site. It's a huge expense to, whether it's a state or local public entity, it's a huge expense on that scale. On the scale of what the developer needs to do to build out the site, it becomes a relatively small line item, and additionally can have access potentially to tax credits and things like that when it's bound up when both the investigation and any subsequent remediation is bound up in the work of redevelopment in a real capital project, not just a public expense.
When we're doing our precedent research around correctional facility adaptive reuse, we can kind of focus in on what information is available around some of that as well, That's often where we find, kind of trends or maybe the surprising things that they found along the way. Yeah.
I think it's important to remember with this site in particular, there is a significant amount of, let's call it demo. And, the available land area is not enormous given some of the other constraints with public works and the wastewater treatment plant and riverfront offset and DOT. So the financials of it was what we grappled with a little bit in the advisory board of, is
all, I think, very good questions and points to raise now. And I think the benefit of having a couple of you who have been part of the vision plan process, that will be very helpful as we move forward. So I want to wrap up this part of today's meeting so we can continue the discussion, jump into a couple of specific questions. But as was mentioned at the beginning of this, one of your roles is sort of as community ambassadors, public outreach proponents for this. And there's two initial events that we really are hoping that you can getting the word out there, encouraging people
No.
to show up.
The owl is rebooting. It's doing it for a minute.
The audio was still coming through. I just checked it with my earbuds on.
All right.
Okay.
We're good.
Still good?
No, he's, his eyes aren't on.
No, that's rebooting.
Okay.
Just leave,
We'll give it a minute
leave
then,
it.
but.
There are the eyes on
Guys,
there
get
again.
back on.
Okay.
Okay, all right, we're back. There's some deep.
Got a little coffee break.
Yeah. Just needed a so the first event's coming up just in a couple weeks, but hopefully you've already seen some of the promotion for this. Tuesday evening, May 5th, from 5 to 7 p.m. at the library will be our public kickoff event for this process. And that is going to do a couple of things. It's going to begin with a fairly brief just overview, some of the things that we've talked about here. You know, what's happened since the vision plan this fall, a couple of major developments there. And then what is this process that we are beginning, that our team is leading? But then really the highlight of that will be Jeff Speck and his keynote discussion about great neighborhoods and the characteristics of that. So that is really an event that we hope you can help to encourage people to come to. We have some flyers here that we'll give to the community, the committee members, and if you can distribute those in places you go to or committees you're a part of, that would be fantastic. We would love to see packed house there for that first event.
So the only thing I would encourage for that meeting is to be really careful on expectation setting.
Right.
So if you're showing that school thing you showed, and that only has a 4 unit per acre density, and we are looking at something that is what 15 plus units per acre, be careful what examples you're picking. Concordians have the long tradition of long-term memory.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you're in the end delivering something completely different than what you presented at that meeting, it might backfire at the town meeting that will approve any zoning. So just be careful.
Great insight. Thank you.
My concern is more basic, which is that I have already heard from a few different people that are planning to attend this meeting, from other elements of the public. And the Goodwin Forum is not that big. So you talked about wanting to have standing room only, but you may have a massive overflow is the risk.
It will be remote also.
How big is this?
It's about what, 70, 80?
It's 90 people.
Oh, 90, there you go, yeah. So it's not that big. The level of interest here is very high.
So I'm on the board of the library, so it's
Yeah.
the forum seats 90. And for large events, we'll actually do overflow in the rotunda. So you got a big video screen out there.
Oh, that's great.
But again, that's probably another maybe 50 people. I don't, it's hard to estimate how many people might show up.
It's very difficult, yeah.
Yeah.
I just think that if anything, the risk is on the upside, not the
I
downside.
agree.
I wonder if there's some way for us to kind of put our invitation in various places and ask people to click if they plan to attend. And then I guess if it turns out that we have an overwhelming number of people, maybe we can move it to high school or something.
Yeah.
It's not unusual for these events to have a free ticket, but you have to have a ticket to get in.
Yeah.
It is a little difficult here in Concord.
Yes.
You will have the Minutemen showing up.
Very location might be something that we should.
If we are concerned about a lot of people showing up, is there any reason we wouldn't want to just plan to go to the high school?
Outside of, it's already published.
It's already published, there are already flyers, it's a little difficult, but
Yeah.
I'm still a little worried.
What's the highest attendance you received for an event in the visioning cycle?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it was like 100 and it was.
300 over the course of the 2 days.
Right, but it was multiple.
No, but
and
once,
it was like a drop-in event over a series of several hours, so I.
Yeah.
I won't tweet it out to my network of Boston urbanists. We recently presented a project in Brookline and we had a few hundred people and literally half the people were not from Brookline. So we actually, that's good to know to not share it in that way.
And I believe the town said that Minuteman Media will be recording it as well.
Yes,
correct?
they'll be recording it.
But when people show up and it's full, is it easy for them to get to the overflow place?
Yeah.
No, very,
50 may not be enough.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge.
yeah, but if it's on Zoom.
Yeah, I think that'll make a difference and.
Yeah.
An hour too.
I know.
We should just have a contingency plan, that's all.
No, that's I think, good questions. And like you said, better to have a upside concern than a downside. So, so that's coming up on May 5th. The next big one, which we will start promoting at that event, and then you will see throughout May and into early June, is this design charrette week, design workshop week, which is a really key part of our approach. Our team will be working here in Concord throughout that week. We actually have space at the townhouse reserved for our team. I saw it this morning before I came in here. I think that will work very well, which is great. And that is, it's kind of multifaceted. There's a couple of different things going on throughout that week. There's going to be two public events during that week. One on Monday evening as sort of the kickoff to the design week, and then a concluding event on Thursday evening where we present the result of the work that our team has been working throughout the week. Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll be holding a series of stakeholder meetings with different groups. It might be town staff, it could be housing advocates, open space advocates, other folks. That's one of our questions for the committee here, and just, I think, one or two more slides. And then, as I said, throughout that week, from really Monday afternoon through the very last minute Thursday afternoon before that concluding event, our team will be working feverishly to look at, bring all of the analysis that we've brought to that week, work through different options, get input from stakeholders, talk through with staff and others, so that hopefully by the end of that week, we have a draft illustrative plan that we can share with the community for input, but that is hopefully a pretty good direction to move forward in. Our team and the Spec Dempsey team has used this approach in a number of other places. I think one of the big benefits to it is that it is a focused period of activity. Our team is here. You have our full attention for the week to really work through a lot more efficiently than if it's a back and forth over several weeks and email and Zoom meetings and things like that. So it's a lot of work, frankly, for our team, but it's a lot of fun. We really enjoy being able to be here and go through that. It's also just great from a public engagement perspective because there are those Monday and Thursday events. And we do typically operate as sort of an open studio too. So if people want to drop in at some point just to share an idea with us, see what we're doing, maybe they can't come to the Monday or Thursday event, we're available to chat with people throughout that as well. So that is something, as I said, we'll start promoting on May 5th. There'll be additional promotions throughout May. And again, we just really hope you can encourage a lot of people to come to those Monday and Thursday events and be part of the process, really see how things evolve from the starting point of the vision plan through the Monday presentation, ultimately where we end up on Thursday evening. And then lastly, for folks to stay informed throughout the process, we're using the same website for the vision plan. It's been updated now to reflect that we're in the master plan phase. So the materials on the homepage here are a little bit different. This is where, as we have our public presentations, draft deliverables, things, those will be posted here as well. Surveys that will be available online after big public events will be posted here. And we haven't lost any of the vision plan content. That's up here on the Learn More tab. There's two subpages for that, and also the link that's right there at the top of the homepage. So that's where, for people who might want to catch up on what the vision plan document was, that is all still there on the website as well.
Do you have a disclaimer that what is in the vision plan might or most likely will change significantly or not?
I can't remember how exactly the vision plan frames those three alternatives in there. But I think, as what you were saying with the examples we show on May 5th, maybe that's a big part of the messaging as well.
Yeah, I think it's again, it comes back to expectation setting in the community.
Put a
People
big banner
go back-
across the top.
Yeah, and people go back to this and say, this is what is there, and that's what we are expecting to be delivered.
There is
And I think we need to have a disclaimer there.
There is a updated FAQs, and it does partly address that question, but we can take another look at it.
Just before the link, just make sure that this plan might change with the master plan.
Or when you hit that page, there's a banner up there that says the work is continuing under the auspices of. Mhm.
In terms of community outreach, in the previous rounds, we did actually flyer every mailbox, every address in town with certain events. I think that may be something we want to consider for the June 8th period. You know, not everyone sees, you know, there's a lot of avenues to get your information, and I think it was a pretty successful, you know, way to get Concordians involved.
I think that's the way to get the right people there, right? The folks who aren't necessarily as active.
In that process, what would you guys say was the most successful format for Concordians?
I think the one that had the most attendees was the virtual presentation, from what I remember. The other engagements were drop-in events near the site, I would say. So getting folks who were proximate. One was outdoors at Borough Park, and one was at the the Harvey Wheeler, yeah. And you know, that helped bring in folks from the neighborhood and other areas. So and they were similar time frame, I think was last spring we were doing this. So but I think offering, you know, multiple avenues, particularly remote options, are helpful to folks.
We also, from a communication standpoint, we had a list of email addresses for like 100 different stakeholders and groups. And so we made sure to blast those folks. And so, for example, if there were committees we thought were stakeholders, we would email the chair of the committee and ask them to share with their committee. So I think we tried to maximize the number of channels we used to make sure that we kind of.
Perfect.
So that sort of wraps up our presentation for today. And now we want to just continue the discussion. We have a couple of kind of question prompts here. And the first one really just continuing this discussion about stakeholders. I think, as you mentioned, there was a large list of stakeholders compiled during the vision plan phase, which is a fantastic point to start from. It's also a lot of individual people. So we do have to do a little bit of sort of prioritizing, or kind of like, here's the people we need to directly talk to because they're representing an important viewpoint or advocacy perspective or role in the site. Who are the stakeholders who are important to be informed about this, and we want to make sure they're coming to processes, but we don't necessarily need to have a conversation with them necessarily, but we want to make sure they're getting their constituents and supporters to come to our events so we can hear from them in that format. So sort of thinking about it in that way, who do you think are maybe some of the most important stakeholders that our team should really try to make sure we talk to early on? Thinking particularly about those series of stakeholder meetings that we'll be having in early June. We're hoping to start outreach and scheduling those in the next week or two to get that on people's schedules. So if you have ideas for, you know, groups, and the stakeholder meetings in June, those could be, you know, individual, but also, you know, kind of focus groups of representatives from a few different organizations that have similar viewpoints, and bring those all together to have, you know, half hour, an hour discussion with them at the townhouse.
How many stakeholder meetings do you plan, or can you support? Let me say that. Over those 2 days, 12, like 12, 16.
Yes, I think we had blocked out, we could potentially even run simultaneous sessions to expand the reach, and we have them going from, you know, maybe 10 to 3 or something to break for lunch. So yeah.
Helpful to talk about stakeholder groups. And then get to individual.
But it can be advantageous to, you said bringing people with similar approaches. It can be advantageous to bring people with different approaches into the same stakeholder meeting. And let them hear each other. We found that you know, there's an advantage to having fewer. I mean, you don't want them to be too big, but to have fewer where people get to hear each other's ideas rather than separating them from each other is a good approach.
So just for how we did it last time around, maybe it's helpful. So identifying stakeholders was a priority then, as it is now. And there are actually 6 or 8 stakeholders who were named in the enabling legislation that said they needed to be consulted. Right, so we knew who those were. We then put together a list of folks, a long list, as I said, a total of about 100. And there were people on there, or people or groups we classified as to be consulted, others to be informed, right? So the consulted ones, and those were, you know, housing groups, for example, were very important stakeholders in that first process. We then made an effort to we actually offered to sit with all the ones that need to be consulted in person, right? So we might have, you know, invite them to one of our meetings or go attend one of their scheduled meetings. And then everybody else who was on the informed was just kind of outbound email and notifications. And if they had questions, of course, everyone was welcome to ask them. But I would imagine, I did take a quick look at the list that was last updated November 2024. I'm guessing, you know, few of those people are going to be less interested. Most will be more interested as we're getting closer to a conclusion here. I'd be surprised if there are a lot of additions to that, because I think it was a pretty comprehensive list. So I would suggest that we just go back and update, you know, take a fresh look at that list, see if is anybody who want to add or remove or reclassify from, you know, consult versus inform.
And they're categorized as well.
They're all categorized.
Housing, yes.
Can I just offer something on stakeholders we talked about this, and just for clarification, there's a lot of interest in this site. There's also a lot of interest in the Rotary. And what we've been clear is we're working with MassDOT on the 5th. They volunteered, they're willing to have a representative there just as presence to make sure that if people go sideways into that, there's someone who's listening. But they're very clear that there's 2 different initiatives. So when you talk about stakeholders, I just wanted to underscore MassDOT has an agenda and a schedule that's very important and different. So this committee needs to be aware of that. We're trying to make sure that they've held off on public meetings with respect to the fact that they want this to happen first. So they've actually been working with us. So I think on the 5th, I just want you to be aware that at that point, we should be able to announce when they will be having a public meeting to talk about the Rotary. So I think you're going to get a confluence of interests happening. I think it's important for this group to be mindful of the lanes that we're kind of skating in. And so that's just, when you talk about stakeholders, that's important to know. And the other, just a comment, you said that for the charrette is going to be sort of a presentation, beginning and end. I think it's important to be clear, is that going to be available so people can participate online? You know, is that a hybrid or not? And if you're going to present, you know, provide outreach, let people know that they could actually be online to observe that. And then in between, I don't think that's going to be real time. So I just think you want to be clear so that people know when and how they can connect.
I think we need to talk about that, because during the short week, the online stuff can be tricky, especially on the first day, but we can figure that out with you guys as we flesh out the agenda for that week.
But certainly the public events would be remote, the Monday and Thursday.
The presentations.
Yeah.
I would expect so, yes.
Yes. I think it's really interesting, the terminology you use with the stakeholder group, because I do also think there's like a second piece to that, which is if the goal is just to keep people informed, I think remote works really well. And obviously it makes it feel open and transparent, which I'm completely supportive for. I think when we're talking to people about it and they're wavering between showing up or not showing up, the feedback is really important to us. And that's really hard when people are remote. So to the extent that people are able to show up and actually interact with the team in person, that's infinitely more helpful to us. And also be able to interact with their neighbors around decisions and questions and comments, I think is really important. So yes, and yeah.
We have to be clear during that charrette, when are those opportunities for the public?
Yes.
To walk in and ask versus the stakeholder meetings and stuff. And just one more comment, Alan, can you just comment, I think DOT in your discussions, they're going to be doing public outreach and they've committed to wait until after the charrette.
That's right.
So
They're willing to, they know the 5th. They've indicated they're willing to have representation, not to present, but to be there as a backstop and to show there's a partnership. They appreciate that. And then they're going to have a public meeting for Concord to talk about the Rotary sometime after the 5th. And they're willing, and they're gonna coordinate with them, so by the time we're at the fifth, there's probably gonna be a notice to the community, there'll be a different meeting from MassDOT. And at the fifth, you can at least identify that, just so that we keep it clear. To Sven's point, in Concord, expectations are
Yep.
really important to manage. And so because these are two major initiatives, we have to be very clear that you don't get, you know, a blurring. You get a partnership, but not a blurring of roles, responsibilities.
Great. Sorry, this gentleman's had his hand up for a while.
Relate to stakeholders and more generally on the site opportunities. When and how are commercial interests and business interests factored into the planning? I'm not talking about the development of the site. I'm talking about commercial interests, retail, and recreation.
Like the business community.
Business community,
Mhm.
because we talked a lot about housing,
Mhm.
but when, you know, those interests and opportunities get factored into the plan.
Mhm. Throughout, in a way, I think first, with the market study and understanding, there's a component of that understanding sort of what the market will support. But the second thing, I think, as a potential stakeholder group, again, we got to go through your list, but I love a kind of area business owner stakeholder group to understand what's
business partners.
Right, but it's not just be informed, but that input into.
Exactly.
Interest.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So when I think of different development projects we've had in town and the types of groups that have raised their voices, you know, and for a major group like this, I see 9 different stakeholder groups: housing, local neighborhood, transportation, traffic. People have concerns about that. People have concerns about school impacts. And so you could have focused conversations with the models that relate to each of these. Commercial, business community with also the fiscal and tax impact concerns that the site would either have positive or negative. Sustainability and green development concerns in town are very significant. Conservation along the waterfront and what's the plan for that? Then historic preservation, those issues have been raised. And then DEI, believe it or not, that, you know, it's a development project, but it actually could have those impacts. And there's a very strong group in town that will raise concerns on that. So that's 9 different groups.
I'd add also recreation.
Okay, recreation,
Cultural.
if that's part of the scheme, that would be great.
Well, I mean, they'll have an interest.
Oh, and cultural and arts. What am I
Cultural
thinking?
council.
Okay, so that's 11. So culture and arts. My wife runs the community arts organization in West Concord.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I'm already. Okay. So that's 11. I think we're pretty much, yeah.
Then it's 99.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so recreation, if we can get recreational uses on the
The
site.
town, CMLP and the particular town departments are sort of given in my mind, town departments.
Well, yeah, but isn't that a sort of a separate process?
But it might still be a stakeholder.
I thought about like, you know, the planning impacts and stuff like the planning board, the select board may be really, but they're gonna be getting briefings.
Well, but also CMLP from there's the revenue question about what we're adding and gaining
Yeah,
and
hopefully
sort of their
they're gonna get-
capacity to support
Yeah.
solar and green energy solutions, that type of thing is
Yeah.
important.
Sustainability and conservation could be combined.
Yeah, a couple of
Yeah.
a number of these could be combined.
Well, okay, but I'm thinking about, it's pretty distinct in that, you know, the riverfront is a sort of, natural resource asset that also continues along. I think it may be different.
I think it is.
We're talking about green development standards on the other side, you know, like.
Geothermal,
LED
district
and-
heating.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are
It's a very
slightly different
set
from
of
protecting the riverfront. That's right.
Excuse me, may I?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. With regard to transparency, Mark Galis, President of Concord, currently Chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee. But I'm just speaking in general about transparency process. I feel like everybody in town is a stakeholder. I think that in the interest of transparency, I understand the value of having these types of meetings, but because it's somewhat arbitrary who ends up, I think they should be video recorded and posted because it kind of will stir up the soup of additional public input and things like that. They shouldn't just have a few minutes there. And I don't see any reason why you could have meetings that are not video recorded and given to the public unless specific reasons are stated for that, like you're talking to, legal counsel or some other advisory group. Because there's a lot of concern in town, I'm one person, about, we don't want to have a thing about how, where was that discussed, when was that heard? It's much better to get it all in the open. And I think what Mr. Speck was saying about having diverse opinions, that makes these recordings even more valuable, because people can hear that discussion and deliberation. Thank you for listening.
This is what stakeholders, thank you, Matt. I'm Joe Colombo, I'm a member of the DEI Commission. Thanks, Matt, for mentioning DEI. And I assume in this committee and in your group, you'll be aware that this means being very actively seeking out diverse participants. Concord, unfortunately, is a racially isolated community. So we have to work extra double hard to make sure the members of our Black community, members of our BIPOC community, second language people who weren't born in this country, who live, work, and participate here, are actively sought as a stakeholder group. I know you'll do that. I just want to put it on record so it's said out loud. Thank you.
To that point, a portion of the input we received before was also like a anonymous online website where you could kind of input your information or comments you had on the proposal or site or anything like that. So
also, as we're trying to encourage workers in the community, let's make it easy, more viable.
That's one underrepresented group that we had a report last week at the select board meeting about the effect of using the residential tax exemption and other property tax initiatives. And in that process, the group that we had put together to study that really tried hard on outreach, and they got a totally abysmal response from renters in Concord. And 26% of Concord's housing units are rental units, and we had something like 43 actual responses to outreach in that. So we know that we're going to be expanding the rental inventory by 430 or so units without doing this project with 2 40Bs that are on the books. And so understanding the sort of how this project might impact the rental community, both from the landlord's perspective as well as from the residents' perspective, is probably an interesting lens to try and put over it that we really don't have good insight.
I'll just go on record. I think that also another important stakeholder is the taxpayer, right? And one of the priorities in advisory board's work was ensuring that what we do at MCI actually would be net tax positive for the town.
Yes.
I think that remains an important priority because we're looking at so much pressure on spending elsewhere that we should not layer onto that here if we can avoid it.
Just to note, there's also 2 hands raised online, so.
Keith Bergman.
Maybe we could stop sharing so we can see them.
But I'm also wanted to mention that I am Concord's representative to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which is one of those 10 stakeholders that's specifically mentioned in DCAM's authorizing statute. So I just want to, unfortunately, I'm on Nantucket. Well, let me take that back. I'm on Nantucket. I'm sorry that I can't be at the meeting today. But I did want to introduce myself, and I want to thank Matt Johnson and others for raising housing at this meeting. It's we know that DCAM's priority or a priority of DCAM and the governor is housing. Our housing groups in Concord are also concerned about affordable housing at some level, restricted housing at some sub-market level. So thanks all for the work you're doing on this most important project.
I just want to add something to Keith's point about housing. I'm hoping that in our public engagement, we're going to get a lot more insight from the public on what housing they need. Our housing groups are obviously very focused on affordability, but we heard a lot of feedback on this tax relief group. People need housing for downsizing. They want small ownership models. We need some diverse community interests of small group housing. And, we also know that Junction Village, there's some deeded affordable housing. So trying to get more insight from the community. We have a housing production plan, but that's not going to be reviewed and revised for some time. But it's very important if we want the citizen support to get that input and make some statement about what our needs are.
Wendy, I'll just say that was a very important dynamic in Lancaster.
Yep.
Which is also a place with an old housing stock, a lot of 19th century homes, and there are many, many people there who are tired of, shoveling a big driveway and getting the snow off the roof, but they want to stay in town and they don't see that they have good options in town. And our plan allows, townhomes, small multifamily places that are much easier to maintain, obviously a newer housing stock, and lets people still feel that they can be part of the community.
Yep.
Also where the market study helps, because you can put some data behind what people are asking for too, which I think just helps ground it in, when the data supports the experience. I think that makes it a really strong argument in favor.
You can hear it because people the stock is short in supply.
Yeah.
For the small.
Yeah.
And then Tanya Gillis has her hand up.
Hi. Yes, hello. Hi. I just want to add to some of the comments just previously made about stakeholder groups and transparency and openness. And it's not only people who are directly abutting or concerned with what goes at the MCI location. It's actually the whole town, because whatever decisions are made there is going to influence other decisions elsewhere. I also think that any meetings held with whoever you deem to be stakeholders, and I think everyone is a stakeholder, and I like Matt's list also, but whoever you deem to be stakeholders, if you have a meeting with them, those should all be open to the public, because that will be a group that is running a meeting in order to advise a committee, and that would be, I think the open meeting law would require that be an open meeting. This was a mistake made through some of the Envision Concord process before, and I think it could be corrected now. Thanks.
I could switch gears a little bit. I'm still a little unclear on, and maybe this is a question for town staff, our deliverable, this committee's direct involvement in the zoning, and then does that get handed off to the planning board and then they follow their process, or are we?
I don't think that's been.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're still working. I think this committee will be good sounding board for the zoning and providing that feedback when we get to like the deliverable phase. How the zoning is implemented and who spearheads that is still up for debate. I am thinking, probably think it's going to be planning board, maybe in combination with select board, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. We're still early in the process right now.
I would just make a general comment that October to town meeting will be a very quick process for a planning board process.
Yeah. Right.
And so I think it's important what we consider is sort of the public input stage, that would otherwise be planning board hearings, when and where those happen and what our role is in that.
Yeah.
I mean, having gone through a process like this back in 2024, where the, housing group wanted to put forward a zoning bylaw amendment, right? We were able to work with the planning board to get a planning board sponsored warrant article. And I presented it at a town meeting, right? And I think we could have a similar kind of a process here where a committee member, master plan committee member, could be the presenter, and in fact, probably help author the warrant article and so on, and shepherd it through the public hearings. So I didn't see that at all in the proposal. You sort of say, develop the zoning, but actually, no, you develop the zoning, but you got to get it through town meeting. And there's a big process with that. So I think there is a process or sort of where it doesn't have to be fully owned by the planning board. It can be a cooperative effort.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great example.
Should we move on to your other couple bullets? Success.
Sure. Yeah. So I took the screen down just so we could see everybody. So next question or prompt is just as you think about what success looks like at the end of this process, what are some key elements of that that could maybe help inform our team as we're getting started here? Whether that's process related or outcome related, you really think this site should have this or that, or again, just anything else that'll help us. And partly, we want to get to know the committee a little bit better, and especially everything that you've heard over the last year and a half plus through the vision plan process and everything. So what are some elements of success that you think are important to keep in mind here at the start?
I mean, one I just heard was revenue positive.
Yes,
So-
right. And I think just to comment on that is definitely tax positive, but we're also looking to build a commercial business. We're very dependent on residential revenues, and we really want to sort of improve that mix because it's very heavy residential right now. So that's important. And then obviously, I'll say it again, the viability of the plan is really important from a commercial perspective.
Do you have, when you say viability of the plan from a commercial?
So just making sure as we put this forth and we should be talking some kind of mix of what's housing versus commercial. And that for the commercial side, because maybe it's the environmental concerns, we need to make sure that this will be successful and we'll have developers at the table ready and wanting to develop.
I'd like to echo that. I
Yeah.
think it's easy to make a plan that kind of is utopian and aligns with all of our values and everything else. But if there aren't developers who want to come in and build it, if the economics are simply not going to work for them, then we accomplish nothing. So I think it's really important that what we put together should be feasible from a development standpoint. And I'd even like to see us speaking to developers along the way. Paul and I have met with somebody who's interested in developing recreation space or facilities in the town. I know that the folks who built Novo are also potentially interested in this site. So the idea of having, I think it would be good to get market feedback along the way from developers who might be willing to come in on a relatively near-term timeline to actually develop what we're imagining.
So along that, I absolutely underline what we are saying, but I still somehow have the dream that we have some kind of vision around this, that it is not a set of ugly big apartment building. Yeah, that we are building something that or enable to potentially build with the economic frameworks that are important, that just look a little bit, I would say, more pleasing, a bit more kind of residential, foot traffic friendly, and are not just this massive blocks of apartment buildings. That's just a dream I have. If we achieve that, the question, what I personally would see as success, if we can do that financial framework that works for developer and deliver something that is, perhaps with my German background, more European style, than these massive American apartment blocks.
So like the idea of building an actual kind of district or neighborhood versus a sort of project or development, like something that's
A vibrant
contributing.
neighborhood, right, that doesn't take away from West Concord.
That's
And also would attract visitors to our community, right? We have some nice historic.
Well, that's one of the challenges, by the way, of the commercial development is how to encourage tax positive commercial development that doesn't drain the finances of West Concord Village. So, that's and so retail is particularly sensitive use. But I wanted to kind of riff off of the architectural thing and to say, one of the things that I was a little concerned about in the proposal is about that notion of building a neighborhood that looks like it was always there. And while I like the sentiment, on the other hand, I don't want to see sort of the moral equivalent of another faux farmhouse retro looking thing. I think what Concord represents isn't history as much as authenticity. And that we should be authentic to the moment, and that it's much better to build something contemporary that is now and meets current needs than it is to just try to create I remember going to Florida's Celebration, and it was like, okay, I'm in Disney America, and I don't want to create a Disney Concord. Okay, so I hope we can go there and respect that architecture has evolved over the last 200 years, and so as planning and design, and that there are new ideas. So that's what's on my mind.
So this is a really important question for the imagery.
Yeah.
It's not an important question for the outcome in terms of the regulating plan. And you as a community may wish to put your finger on the scale in terms of how a future developer does approach the question of style and architecture.
And design guidelines.
Vocabulary. You may want to do that. However, we see it as our job as planners to determine what sort of vocabulary in the renderings is most likely to get you the thumbs up at town meeting. And I'm not saying I know what that answer is, but it's going to be a tricky, course to weave to figure that out.
Okay, the second concern I have is around the methodology for zoning, because when I look at the master planning process that you've outlined and your background particularly, I see massing plans and stuff that are much more aligned with form-based code modes of zoning. And yet, when I look at the proposal, it explicitly excludes the creation of a form-based code from the scope. So I feel like we could end up with a nice, framework plan that we couldn't implement with traditional zoning that we really must do with form-based code, and yet we've already excluded it from the scope of the proposal.
I'm not sure what the vocabulary was that described that, but the regulating plan is a form-based code.
So to speak, it's a form-based code in that it regulates all the things you're talking about. When you described it earlier, it's not a form-based code that is consistent with Mass General Law for zoning.
That's what we would need to actually get on the.
I want to let Maggie jump in because I know Nels is also part of this conversation, who's not here today.
Well, I was actually I'm sorry, Elisa, I was gonna kick it to you because I know it was part of the conversation during our scoping, and the form-based coding charrette had been taken out of the sort of final scope. So I didn't know if you wanted to give a little context into sort of why that piece was, do we want to talk about where that?
Yeah, I think it was just the workshop that was taken out
Yeah.
for the public workshop on form-based code, because it was, that was an alternate that we were considering, but it wasn't because we didn't know what zoning would actually, be a result of this planning effort. It seemed really limiting to say we're going to have a form-based code workshop when we don't know if we're going to have a form-based code zoning. And I think at the time when we had heard from Stantec, you had talked about a hybrid, sort of like a hybrid of a form-based code and traditional code. So I think that sounded like that might be more in line with something Concord would be able, that would be more used to in terms of what we have now for zoning. I think form-based codes are extremely difficult to implement and monitor from like a town staffing perspective. So I think we were initially leaning against having a specifically a specific form-based code for this district.
I think what will be really useful with this group, because obviously as we continue to work our way through this process, I think we're also going to refine and hone in on what that deliverable looks like. And I think one of the important conversations will be what we started here already, which is the distinction between the confines of the DCAM developer arrangement and what that sort of regulates, and the physical zoning here and what that regulates, how it relates to your other zoning. So I think it's going to be a strategy that includes some form of that, but some form of the guidelines that you're talking about might be regulated by development. So I think as we continue to talk through this, let's figure out what pools those go into, and we can And we can help support through that. That would be the approach I would recommend.
Yeah.
Because there are our experiences that with respect to the plan on the site, there are a couple of ways to manage that, and we need to understand how it gets administered. Like that's a longer, more detailed conversation. But I think what I'm hearing pretty loudly is concern about sort of the form and and what that looks like and what that means in terms of character and how you can communicate that and perhaps hold somebody's feet to the fire about that.
That's what I was saying, you know, that, for example, the example you gave in that seminar that's not now going to be in scope, is like the interface between the Junction Village site and the MCI site. And that's a perfect example of a way in which a form-based code zoning would step down, you know, the density as you got there, and that it's very difficult to implement in conventional zoning. And so I looked at that and I go, yeah, we want to be able to do that, but if we don't have the tools to do that, then we're kind of setting ourselves up, not for failure, but for a compromise from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, we're here at the very beginning of the process. How can we kind of define the scope so that we actually can go to the finish line here instead of stopping right in front of the finish line and say, well, sorry, that's not part of the project.
Matt, I would expect that the regulating plan that we develop will address many, if not all, of the types of concerns you're raising. Like, how does one edge of the site relate to what's happening across the street, even though that's not part of the site and not part of the regulating plan, but our regulating plan can speak to some of that. And I would expect that both the zoning, which probably will take the form of more traditional zoning, as well as the DCAM MOU, both of those documents will refer to the regulating plan. And so each of those documents is a way to sort of require and encumber the developer to build what is described in the regulating plan, even though the regulating plan is not zoning code in the sense of mass general law zoning.
Yeah, and I think your Lancaster example could be a good one. I was shocked when you mentioned, subdivision control law, that actually this thing might just get developed as a subdivision. It's like, wow, that's a subdivision? But yeah, so if there are creative ways to do that, I'm open to hearing them. It's just that when I read through the proposal, it kind of led me down to, well, we're supposedly creating zoning as the output, and this isn't leading us there.
I do think Concord is already, I hope, and will benefit from the Lancaster process, which is a good 6 months or a year ahead of you in some ways. And I will say in that process, Paul's here from DCAM today. The DCAM commissioner, Adam Bakey, some of you may have met him, is very hands-on in these processes. Jeff and I were in a 2.5 hour long DCAM Lancaster meeting yesterday that the commissioner attended the entire meeting. And I take it from Paul's comments earlier that he was actually on vacation and took 2.5 hours out of his vacation to attend this very detailed meeting about next steps on Lancaster. And so I think you're going to have support from DCAM and also the experience of Lancaster to build on as this process moves forward.
Can I just note, we're at 11:30 and I understand lunch is here. I don't want to stop the conversation because I know you have more to get to. I just want to acknowledge that it's 11:30. I don't know where lunch is, if it's out
I think
there.
Elizabeth is getting it. Yeah.
So let's keep going, but I think we should continue to work through lunch, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Open to that?
And the tour starts.
The tour starts at 12:30, right? So, right?
Well, yeah, just a note on the tour. So there is going to be a tour approximately 12:30, depending on when we wrap up here. We're going to try to get a bite to eat, for lunch. And the tour is geared toward the consultant and the consultant team. And they have identified a few areas and buildings in particular that they want to take a closer look at, particularly buildings that have a more preserved, just according to all the work that was done in the vision plan. Focus in on those areas, look at those buildings in a little bit more detail. The committee here, I know you were just appointed on Tuesday, so it's been very quick and quick process to have this first meeting. I'm glad we were able to get everyone together. The site tour, you are also invited, but because of open meeting law, you may not discuss anything or ask questions. So it's up to you whether you want to attend, knowing that just that it'll just be an observation role only.
But
So
they're
just
asking questions about, they can't be asked about the
not
site
allowed,
itself.
yeah. No, not, according to, we asked the, yeah, that was the guidance we were given, so. Just wanted to.
Will be at, but, correct?
Consultant and staff will ask questions, yes.
So there'll be.
Okay.
So you'll be able to,
So we'll
but it's
ask
just that,
We can talk about the weather.
Yeah.
We can talk about the weather.
Yeah, but you can ask questions, just don't get answers.
part of it is really that we had to have a list for DCAM
Yeah.
before. And we just weren't able to, knowing that the committee was appointed, a couple days ago, and then getting a list to DCAM of everyone that was gonna attend, wasn't able to line it up, so.
And Elisa and Wendy, this is your call and your decision. This has been a very helpful conversation so far. I would not want to extend this too far into our time for the tour, because this is the consulting team's like one shot to get on site and really see everything. And so we're hopeful that we can do that as soon as that window opens for when we can get on site, which I think is noon.
Yes.
So let's see.
Before you, we,
Time.
I think we're trying to get there at noon, but I don't, I think here's lunch, yay. A little bit of a delay with the lunch, but here it is. And so, I think what we need to do here now is, I think we've heard a lot of good feedback and you've got some, answers to those questions that you had initially. The next, thing I just wanted to mention is that we are envisioning that committee will, be able to meet, with staff and the consultant probably on a monthly basis. If the committee decides to meet more frequently, that is totally fine as well, but it won't be necessarily involving the consultant team at those meetings, just because we have, a certain scope, and we have, scoped it for basically a once a month meeting with the consultant team. Okay, and so just wanted to kind of put that out there. And then, I think, what was that? So actually, can I ask Dan, you have a quick
I
question?
did, and why I want to see if and a chance for success, and I want to have my, so. Just before we, lose focus.
We can also get our lunch and sit here and eat and talk.
Right, yeah.
Typically one.
Lunch is here, if you guys want to grab anything, yeah, but.
Do you want me to go now or finish
Oh,
your
I would-
logistics? Okay.
Yeah.
I would say in terms of success, I like Matt's comments about the visuals and the importance of that and not defaulting to a referential architecture. I would say, success, I think, also has to look a little bit beyond the walls, quote unquote. We have to think about not only connectivity to West Concord, but also across the Route 2 and across Commonwealth. I think, for many generations, the prison site has been a place that most Concordians don't go. And it's represented a disconnect between different parts of town. I think there's a real opportunity here to connect parts of town that have been disconnected.
Three very quick ones. First, I was pleased and not surprised, Jeff, you talked about walkable, non-auto reliant. That's huge. No particular order, sustainable, net zero possible. I think the whole project should be net zero possible. That gives you a metric to sort of measure it. Maybe my favorite is sort of sticky. People want to come and they want to stay.
Yeah.
What?
Love it. I love it. That's great.
One more. I think it's important that we actively look at the other sites in town that Glenn just was looked at. I think it's vitally important that we try to optimize what is located where. I think that given its proximity to Route 2, the MCI site is a natural place for a lot of commercial development. I think some of the other sites in town, thinking about Ely School, thinking about Italy, those are very natural. Pies Road, those are very natural places for housing. Right, so I hope we can avoid feeling like we've got to cram everything onto MCI, and let's make sure that we think about the optimal location of different usages around town.
Okay, so I think so we need to.
Should adjourn the meeting?
No,
Yeah.
meeting thing, I think.
We need to do some polling of availability.
Oh, okay.
I think, because I don't think we want to do it now. I'd rather people want lunch and we'll do that.
So when did
Your
we
meeting adjourn? One question, yeah. So
I was just gonna say, maybe thinking about some of these dates coming up, our
Mhm.
goal would be to prep for that June 8th.
Mhm.
Some of our analysis of the site and things that we've seen.
Mhm.
And what would be very timely for us,
Mhm.
depending on your schedules, is to meet in advance with this group potentially to go over some of that early information,
Right.
to get some feedback and to hone some principles and priorities
Yep.
from that.
That's great.
So just in terms of timing, it would be nice if there was enough time between that meeting and our June 8th to
Think of May, maybe
May
a
11th.
mid-May.
Yeah, May
May.
11th.
Wait.
Think of May 11th work. Is that too far?
I was thinking a little later in May, but
Maybe some,
Yeah.
I think.
but just
second or third
FYI.
week, probably.
Okay, all right, so we'll work with that, great. And I know we want to get out to people for those stakeholder meetings
Yes.
also. We have the groups and we can start talking once
Start
we start
doing that,
collecting people
talking,
names and just
even
get that list.
scheduling.
Shannon is really helpful with.
I know she likes that.
Huge.
Right,
Not
okay.
here, let's volunteer for one.
Well, she's gonna be cool days.
All right.
All right, so with that, we'll adjourn the meeting.